Hey everyone, Mark Meckler here, president of Convention Estates, and it's the BattleCry. It's Sunday night. It's where I like to be with you. I wasn't here last week. Hopefully you guys had a good time watching the interaction between me and Rick Green at our Gave event out there in Fredericksburg. I had a great time. Rick had a great time. We wanted to show you that footage because a lot of people came up to us and said that was some of the best interaction they'd ever seen between the two of us. We always have fun, and you never know what's going to happen. It's like a couple of jazz musicians riffing off of each other. I love being up in front of the room in front of Rick because he has so much knowledge, so much wisdom, so much enthusiasm. We just play off each other. And so, I could play second fiddle to Rick any day. I think it was a great video. If you haven't seen that yet, go back and watch last week's BattleCry. But this week I'm here with you, and you might notice I'm wearing a new t-shirt. This is our Article 5 Term Limits Now t-shirt. And this one attracts a lot of attention. I got to say, when I wear it around the country, people give me the thumbs up. This is brand new. We've had it before, but we've had it in kind of a reddish burgundy color. I wear those, but I'm not as big of a red burgundy guy. I am a dark blue kind of a guy. And so I think you're going to get a lot of response if you get this t-shirt. Go to article5outfitters.com. That's article5outfitters.com. Spell that out, article5outfitters.com. And you can pick up one of these shirts or one of these cool hats. I'm always wearing gear because it is an excuse to spread the message and talk about Convention Estates. All right, let's jump right into it. I think the first thing I want to do is give you your battle cry. Like, what is the actual action that you should take today? And my answer is you should save their America. What do I mean by their America? Well, it's obviously what I mean by you. It's you who are watching this or listening to this. By their America, I mean your kids and your grandkids. I mean the kids in the nation collectively. The nation's at stake. I mean, I don't think you would disagree with that. Anybody who's watching this wouldn't disagree with that. The nation is a mess right now. Our politics are a mess. Our culture is a mess. Business is a mess. Our universities, our schools, all the way down to kindergartens are a mess. We got to do something about it. And I look at my life, I'm 62 years old. And so I'm getting in the upper end of life. And then I look at my granddaughter who was just born. I just had my first granddaughter born just a couple of months ago, Lorelei. She's beautiful, healthy, growing baby. And I'm going to do everything I can to fight for her. One thing I know that's so poignant to me once she was born, I really started thinking about is when she's grown, when she's really an adult and out there in her life in the world, I'm not going to be here to protect her, most likely. I'm not going to be here to work to save the country, most likely. And whatever I do now is what I'm going to leave for her future. So I look at that beautiful, innocent, perfect baby. And I know a lot of y'all are grandparents or parents out there, or got nephews or nieces or friends with kids. And I hope that you'll look at them and think about what's it going to be like when they're 30 or 40 years old? What's it going to be like for them? Are they going to have free speech? Literally, are they going to be able to express the things that they believe in without fear of persecution and prosecution and being debanked, being kicked out of their job, kicked off social media, whatever it is? Are they going to be able to live a life where they can think what they want and speak what they want? Because, by the way, that's not a lot of human history. So we take it for granted that we have free speech, but we have to fight to save their future in free speech. We have to fight to save their future in the freedom to associate. We have to save and fight for their future in freedom of religion, right? People attack freedom of religion all the time. It's being attacked right now. I'm not talking about freedom to worship. The left tends to make that a distinction, like you can do whatever you want inside your church. Well, maybe not whatever you want because you're not allowed to talk politics, right? But they want to limit our ability to practice our faith in the marketplace, out in the open square, at work, at sporting events, with signs in public, with monuments in public. What kind of world are you going to leave to your kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, your neighbors' kids? What kind of future are you going to leave? So when I'm doing all this stuff, what I'm thinking about is I'm fighting to save their America. Of course, I'm fighting for our America right now, here and now, but I'm also trying to leave a legacy. Little Lorelei, 25 years from now, is going to be 25 years and 2 months old. And then the question is, what's her world look like? 25 years from now, God willing, I'll be 87. Maybe I make it that long. Maybe I don't. But I want to do everything I can so when she's 25 or 30 or 40 years old and she's raising her own family, she has the freedoms that I had. So I'm working to save their America. We have a big promotion coming up on this that we'll be announcing soon. I hope that you guys will get involved and save their America. That's what I'm fighting for today. It's more for them than me. It's for my kids, my grandkids, and everybody who's going to come after us. We have the country we have because great patriots throughout the ages have fought to save our America. So now it's our time. It's our duty, right? We do our duty. Results belong to God. All right, let's jump into the biggest news this week. I think it's the biggest news. That was the vice presidential debate. I don't generally like to watch the debates. I find them frustrating, non-substantive. I find the moderators biased and outrageous, which of course, again, they were this time. So I generally just read the commentary about the debates, but this time I actually watched. And I watched for two reasons. One is because I think JD Vance is an extraordinary political talent. He's an incredibly smart guy. He's a self-made guy. It's so funny. The left is criticizing him for going to Yale now, for becoming a lawyer and making a lot of money. The guy came from an incredibly humble background. And isn't that the American dream? Isn't that one of the things that makes the United States so unique, that you can come from nowhere? You can come from Appalachia. You can have a mom who's an addict. You can grow up having to rely on assistance for food, and you can end up being wealthy and running for the vice presidency of the United States of America. So I have a lot of admiration for JD Vance. And it's not just that story. He's an incredibly smart guy. He's an incredibly sophisticated guy. I've had a chance to talk to him. I've been to events where he's at. If you watch him maneuver, he's very good at this. And he does it without getting flustered. And even though the moderators were incredibly biased, and I wonder why Republicans keep participating in this, JD Vance handled it with grace, aplomb, skill, cunning, and the right amount of aggressiveness. I mean, one of the things I loved about it, at one point, the moderators fact checked him, and they were wrong, by the way, in their fact checked, as they so often are. And he fact checked them straight back, and he wouldn't let them do it. They had an agreement that the moderators wouldn't be doing fact checking, but the moderators tried, and he pushed back, until they cut off his microphone. I think that made them look bad, not him. Now, I have some general frustration with JD Vance's debate performance, though I want to say if you go from F to A, I give him an A plus on his debate performance, but could have been a plus plus. I think he was a little weak on the way he handled abortion primarily, but abortion and childcare. I want to start with abortion. Look, I am stridently, unapologetically, completely and utterly pro-life. And by the way, I think JD Vance is too. But I think he's trying to nuance it here. And I understand that for the electorate, the way it is right now, you have to do some nuance. I just don't think that he did that great of a job of it. And when he says, we have to understand where women are coming from, et cetera. Yes, I agree with that. But I felt like he didn't make a strong enough, vociferous enough defense of the unborn. And I think he should have done that. Could have been just as compassionate, just as understanding, but taking a position for children. And asking, I think the most important thing that a candidate can do is to ask his or her opponent now. If you're a pro-life person, you ask your pro-abortion person, was there any point at which you limit abortion? Are you in favor of abortion at 8 months when a baby is fully formed in the womb? I think we need to push them and ask that question. And so he didn't do that. Not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And so that's probably my one main criticism. Secondary criticism was on childcare. And there is an assumption that was had during this debate that in some way the federal government has to do something about childcare. First of all, they called it a childcare crisis, and I don't think it's a crisis. I'm tired of everything in the world being referred to as a crisis. Well, we have a climate crisis, we have a childcare crisis, we have a grocery price crisis. Everything is a crisis. Not everything is a crisis. A war is a crisis. A dam bursting in your community is a crisis, genuinely speaking, right? Things like that are crisis, but the fact that childcare is too expensive for a bunch of people, that's not a crisis. It is a problem. I don't want to minimize the problem. I understand that problem. There have been times in my life when Patty and I have relied on childcare very early on in our marriage. We're both working, and it's expensive and it's difficult to afford always. We were blessed. We had friends who helped us out. We paid for it, but it was not too unreasonable. But that's hard. But there are better solutions to the childcare crisis than the federal government getting involved. And frankly, I think it's none of the federal government's damn business. I don't want them helping people with childcare. Look, the first solution to the childcare crisis, first and number one, the childcare crisis is highest among unwed mothers. So the first solution that we should be talking about always and forever is the idea that people should get married, have children, stay together in that order. Actually, first finish high school, get married, have children, stay together. Those things will virtually guarantee that you won't be in poverty. Those are the number one, those four steps, number one for keeping people out of poverty and helping people rise up in the economic system. And the problem is we don't focus on marriage anymore. We're comfortable with children being born out of wedlock. I'm not saying that we should attack people as children are born out of wedlock, but that's something we should discourage and not encourage. Single motherhood is not a good thing. It's not good for the kids. It's not good for our society. It's not good for children to be raised without fathers in the home. And it makes childcare completely unaffordable and totally necessary. Second is when you're young and raising kids, for most people, most parents, it's not easy. There's hardship, there's sacrifice. There came a time in our lives, me and Patty, where we sacrificed income for Patty to stay home and take care of the kids. That's a hard decision to make. We were really blessed because we lived near my parents and my parents helped provide childcare for us. And that made things much easier to do. I wouldn't say easy, but easier to do. And I think people have to get used to the idea that keeping families together, maybe even moving from the place that you want to be, the place that you love, maybe you moved away from your parents to go to college and you stayed there and you need to move back to near your parents in order to have appropriate childcare and family support, be where your family is. That's actually the healthiest model for raising children. Again, I realize not everybody can do that. And by the way, when I say it, I don't mean it's easy. If you've moved across the country for your career, for college or whatever, and you put roots down there and now you got to move back home, maybe to a place you'd rather not be in order to make it healthier for you to raise your children. I know that's not easy. I still think that's the solution or one of the solutions. That's a better solution than saying, I expect the president to do something about this. I got to be honest with you. When I look at the president of the United States, no matter who it is, the last thing I think about the president is, oh, he needs to handle childcare problems. When I had childcare issues, the last thing I'm thinking is like, why isn't the president taking care of this? The president isn't supposed to take care of everything. I had aphids in my garden over the last couple of weeks. I hate those little buggers. Last thing I thought is, oh, the president should be dealing with my aphids, right? It's not, these are not things that the president or the federal government should be dealing with. So I didn't like that J.D. Vance seeded the ground on childcare and somehow the government should be involved in childcare. If the government should be involved, I actually think first it's parents, family, churches, community. Man, if you got to have government involved, maybe it's your county, maybe it's the state, but certainly not the federal government. So I didn't like that Vance seeded that. Again, I don't want to sound too critical. I think he did a masterful job. I think Tim Walz largely was terrible. I think he was better than I expected. Even saying that he was terrible, I think he literally took a spear to the chest on the issue of lying about being in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square protests. He was nowhere near Hong Kong. And look, he's just a liar, and he's the worst kind of liar because he lies about little things that don't matter, right? And that means that on the big things, he's absolutely lying. So I think he took a spear to the chest on that one. And I think generally speaking, he seemed nervous and not really competent. I don't think he was ready for the big time. Bad pick by Kamala Harris. I think that's a good pick for Republicans. So that's the debate, and I think we can put a bow on that one. Several weeks of incredible wartime results for Israel. Israel has been involved in a military operation probably second to nothing we've ever seen in the world. First, the Grim Beeper attack, as it's being called, and I love that moniker. The beepers exploding on Hezbollah operations, on Hezbollah operatives all over the Middle East, removing their private parts, damaging them severely, and sometimes killing them. Some people say we shouldn't laugh about this stuff. I think it's hilarious. These are violent terrorists who have no problem sacrificing their own children, literally by the thousands, making children into bombs, bombing Israeli civilians, killing Americans. I laugh when those people get killed or damaged, and I think it's great. Second was the walkie-talkie attack. So after the beepers blew up, walkie-talkies blew up. This is incredible how the Israelis got into the supply chain, opened a beeper company 15 years ago, built this thing out, ultimately got into Hezbollah's supply chain, had explosive in those beepers, had them go off to start this operation, then the walkie-talkies. and then apparently had such incredible intelligence on Hamas and Hezbollah that they were able to take out Nasrallah, who was the leader of Hezbollah. The story is, and I don't know if this is true or not. Of course, you have Mossad never confirms this kind of stuff. Israel never confirms. I think that's wise. But the belief is that some kind of operative shook hands with Nasrallah and implanted some kind of nanotechnology that tracked his presence to a headquarters in Beirut, which was filled with not just him, but many top Hamas or Hezbollah operatives, bombed it and blew it up. I mean, absolutely unbelievable strike. There are people who complain, oh, well, there were civilian casualties. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think that's tragic. There are always civilian casualties in war. But when you place military headquarters in the middle of a civilian neighborhood, there are going to be civilian casualties. Every drop of that blood, if there are innocents who paid the price, every single drop of that blood is on Hezbollah, on Nasrallah for locating those facilities in those areas. That's what they want to happen. So you have this ongoing war. Now Israel is invading southern Lebanon. I want you to understand why that's happening. Southern Lebanon borders with northern Israel. There was a buffer zone created by a UN resolution many, many years ago that has not been enforced by the UN. The UN, in fact, has facilitated the flow of Hezbollah terrorists and arms into this buffer region in the south of Lebanon on the northern Israeli border. And ever since October 8th, remember that date? That's after October 7th, after the Hamas invasion, slaughter, torture, rape, and kidnapping into Israel. Hamas did all that. And then in conjunction with Hezbollah, Hezbollah began launching rockets into Israel. At this point, somewhere between 8 and 10,000 rockets launched into northern Israel. And there are roughly 70 to 100,000 Israelis that are now out of their homes and have been out of their homes since last October. Now, what would the United States do if on an equivalent scale, Mexico or a terrorist group inside Mexico were launching 8 to 10,000 rockets, say, into El Paso? Right? What would they do? San Antonio, anywhere across the border, California across the border. What would the federal government do? And I think the American people would be clamoring for a full scale, large, aggressive response on the Mexican government and or the cartels. That's what Israel's doing. All they're trying to do is clear the territory so they can return 100,000 people back to their homes. God bless them for fighting the fight that the entire world should be fighting against the Islamic radicals. This is absolutely insane that we're even having a debate about this. I think when you have people like Candace Owens has gone over to the dark side and has actually, I'm going to say, is promoting evil, promoting anti-Semitic tropes, promoting blood libels, anti-Israel. Why should we, as the United States, care about what goes on in Israel? Why should you, as a citizen of the United States, as a member of the Western world, why should you care? And the answer is because the Muslim world, broadly writ, not all Muslims, but Islamism is against the Western world. It is fundamentally incompatible with the Western world. I think sometimes we have a problem understanding this as Westerners because we see religion as one thing and government as another. And those of us who are believers, who are Christians, believe that everything we do in government should be influenced by our faith. Our decisions should be based upon our faith. But we do not believe in theocracy. And Islam, as a religion, is a theocracy. There is no separation from religion and government. The example of this is that you have Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, is a religious leader. That you have the Ayatollahs in Iran that are the heads of Iran. They run Iran. Nothing happens without their approval and their say-so, and they design Iranian policy. They are religious leaders, right? These are religious theocratic figures that run their system of government. That's how they believe the world should be run, and they believe that the world should be under entirely Islamic control, something they call a caliphate. And so when we are pushing back against that, we are pushing back against the caliphate. And the caliphate, by the way, wants to rule Europe and expects to rule Europe. Look at what's going on right now in the streets of Europe, in Paris, and in Greece, in Italy, all over the European continent, in Sweden, Malmo. The city of Malmo, once a beautiful Swedish city, now I think is more than half North African immigrants. These are Muslim immigrants, practice Islam. The city is not safe for native Swedes any longer. Look at the stuff that's going on over in Europe, and it's coming here to the United States. Look at the pro Hamas people, the pro Palestinian people, the pro Hezbollah people protesting on our university campuses. By the way, those are the future leaders of tomorrow, right? Those are the people who are going to be coming up through our systems. We see this on some of our quote unquote finest university campuses. They are pro terrorism, pro Islamism, pro Hamas, pro Hezbollah, pro Palestinian against the West. And so, why do we support Israel? Because Israel is the point of the spear for the West against Islamism. And if you don't want Islamism taking over the United States of America, then you've got to be pro-Israel. There's really no choice. Now, that's not to say, by the way, that America doesn't have interests distinct from Israel. Of course they do. I'm an American citizen, not an Israeli citizen. I'm America first. I'm not Israel first, but I am pro-Israel, where Israel's policy align with the future health and safety and security of America and the Western world. And right now, that's in the fight against Islamism in the Middle East. And there is a counterforce, by the way. I mean, you have this fight between Iran and the rest of the Muslim world right now. And in that fight, Saudi Arabia are our allies, and there are others. Jordan are our allies. The UAE are our allies. Allies because Iran is the mutual enemy, not necessarily allies in the long term in a worldview, but because Iran is the mutual enemy. So we should be, I am stridently in support of Israel, and I hope you are too. And people will say, by the way, I just want to say this up front and be open about it. I'm a Jewish Christian. People will say, oh, that's because you're a Jew, and they will malign me for it. I get that all the time. I get accused of having dual loyalties or whatever that trope is. People slander me for being a Jew. I get that all the time online. I do this because I believe in the Western world. I believe that Israel is the point of the spear. And I also believe that the Bible tells us that we'll be blessed for taking care of Israel and being on the side of Israel and loving Israel, and will be cursed for not doing that. And I'm a Bible believing Christian. So there you go. That's my diatribe on Israel. I hope that makes my position clear. Coming back domestically, we had a dock workers strike, and I don't know if you watched any of the footage of the leader of the dock workers, the longshoremen. Only one word comes to mind for me: thug. The guy's a thug. He was threatening you and threatening me and demanding a 75% raise over the next couple of years for the dock workers, for the longshoremen. 75%. By the way, the vast majority of those guys make over 100,000 a year, 150,000 a year. Unbelievable, the demands, demanding not to automate our ports. This is an issue I've been studying for the last couple of years, by the way, because it came to my attention during the pandemic. We have the worst ports by performance in the entire modern world. The worst. We're not, our ports, which are huge, our West Coast and East Coast ports, which are huge, not even in the top 50 performing ports in the world. Why? Because of that thug and because of the dock workers. Because they won't allow any automation, because they get paid way too much for the jobs that they do. I mean, this is just offensive and outrageous. And by the way, I want you to understand, when those ports are inefficient, you pay the price. When those dock workers get paid, they're now going to get the strike is settled. They're going to get a 67% pay. Wouldn't you like a 67% pay raise? They're going to get that, and everything you buy will be more expensive. Inflation will go up because of what they're doing. Because they refuse to allow those ports to be automated, your stuff is more expensive. The shirts that you wear, the shoes that you wear, the cars that you drive, the food that you eat that's imported, every single thing that's imported or has an imported component is more expensive because of those longshoremen. And I wish we would have just busted that longshoreman strike. I think if Trump had been president, that he would have been likely to do that. There is an act that allowed him to delay that strike for 80 days. And Biden and Harris, they came out on the side of these folks. And you should watch the way the ports run in China. Amazing automation. It's completely beautiful. The trucks don't have drivers. They're all automated. The longshoremen are actually guys sitting at computers directing all this stuff. Everything's highly efficient, meaning you, the consumer, or at least their consumers in China, do better. And I'm all for keeping jobs on shore. I am absolutely for that, but I'm not against using technology to make us more efficient. The economy is constantly going to be going through change. Capitalism involves what we call creative destruction. It can be really hard on some people. I totally get that. But by the way, I'm sure the buggy makers of yesteryear didn't like it that the car industry came along and cost jobs and businesses. This is the way progress happens. We shouldn't ship those jobs overseas. We should do them here, but we should use the technology at our fingertips to make everything better and less expensive onshore for Americans. So, man, at this point, I got to tell you, I think unions have outlived their usefulness in America. I apologize if you're a union member. I'm definitely an anti-union guy. There was a time in American history where unions were incredible. They were necessary to create safe working environments, fair wages, all that stuff. For the most part, unions have outlived their usefulness. And I think workers should negotiate their own wages with their employers. By the way, that's costing you a lot of money. Another thing that's going on that's costing you money is the federal budget just continues to explode. We just had the first day of the new fiscal year yesterday, and that first day the debt jumped $204 billion in a day. I want to repeat that for you. The debt jumped in the first day of the fiscal year $204 billion to a new record of $35.669 trillion. That's bad. That's really bad. But by the way, it gets worse. They also had to draw down their cash balance, the amount of cash they have on hand, by $72 billion. So that means their upside down position is over $275 billion on the first day of operation of the fiscal year. One day, $275 billion. All of it, I'm sure, spent just wisely and efficiently without any waste, right? Someone in Congress needs to get serious. And very few people in Congress talking about this. Presidential debate, we don't see the presidential candidates talking about this. Generally, they mention it, but it's kind of just in passing. Somebody's got to get serious, but that's probably asking too much. I'm not fantasizing, which means we talk about saving their future. You have to get serious. We have to call a convention of states. We have to impose a balanced budget amendment on them, because they're not going to do it on their own, even if they do talk about it. But right now, mostly they're not even talking about it. And the politicians lie about it. Of course, it's not a problem, or they just ignore it. The number one liar out there right now, from my perspective, though, Kamala Harris. Unbelievable liar. Okay, here's one main thing she's lying about. She is going to, wants to, and absolutely will destroy our energy industry here in the United States, given the chance. And is she lying about it? Of course. Here's her exact quote when she ran for president last time. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. And starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right? And then there has to be legislation. I have a history of working on this issue. So that's what she said. It seems unequivocal. She said, absolutely, yes, I'm going to ban fracking. She said, no question. Now, when asked about that, this is what she says in a most recent interview. That's a mischaracterization that's intended to make people afraid of my presidency. How is that a mischaracterization? She was darn clear. She said, no question, I'm in favor of banning fracking. By the way, that shuts down our domestic production. We have lots of friends in the industry. You probably know people in the industry. Texas runs on the industry. Pennsylvania runs on the industry. Ohio runs on the industry. North Dakota runs on the industry. South Dakota is dependent on the industry. Lots of places around this country. And then, by the way, by extension, everybody in the whole country. Because if energy is more expensive, which it will be if Kamala Harris is president, then everything is more expensive. Remember, I talked about the dock workers. Everything comes through the transportation system. Who do you think fuels the transportation system? Our energy industry. If the price of gas goes up, if the price of oil goes up, then the price of everything goes up. And that's the intent of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And so she's a liar. And yeah, you should be scared of her presidency. That's my personal position on that. If I sound frustrated today, I'm kind of frustrated. Yeah. Mayorkas says that FEMA doesn't have enough money to help the hurricane victims from Hurricane Helene. We're out of money. FEMA's out of money, is what he's saying. I don't know if you've been following the Helene story. I've seen a lot of hurricane devastation. I follow these stories pretty closely because it's, for me, it's about the human side of it, not the human suffering, but to see the best in humans coming out, helping each other. That's what's going on. North Carolina took the worst of it, but there's places in Tennessee that are really bad, Georgia, Florida. Human beings coming out and sharing what they have, doing the best to help each other, local law enforcement, local first responders. Personally, I wish the federal government wasn't involved in this, but we do rely on the federal government. We should revamp that system so we don't. But FEMA takes all that money away from people and tax money and then spends it on illegal immigrants, illegal aliens. I'm not kidding. This is what they do. And this is why Mayorkas says they're now out of money. And this is absolutely unbelievable. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on resettling illegal immigrants. Why is FEMA involved in that? Federal Emergency Management? Like, I don't think, see, this is part of qualifying everything as an emergency. You should be mad. You can't despise these people enough. They're taking your money. They're taking money away from American citizens who are now without power, without food, without water, and they're not rescuing them fast enough. They're not coming in fast enough and doing what they're mandated to do. And they've given that money to illegal aliens. You can't despise them enough. This is the Harris administration writ large. She despises you because you are a legal American citizen, and she's going to do this to our entire government if and when she's elected president. Again, I don't endorse on behalf of Convention of States, but I will tell you my personal opinion. This is the way the country's going under a Kamala Harris presidency. Okay, I'm going to calm down a little bit. We're going to go to something exciting, something really good, which is, I think Americans are a lot smarter than people give them credit for. Certainly a lot smarter than a lot of the politicians give them credit for. We just did national polling on Convention of States. We do it state by state quite often. The polling results are always positive. The vast majority of people are in favor of Convention of States, regardless of what state we do it in. But we just did a national poll. This is the first time we've done it nationally. And I want to give you the results. 86% of Americans feel confident about voting. I think that's really important. So people are going to vote, right? People are willing to participate in our electoral system. I think that's really important. 59% trust state legislators more than Congress. 60%, almost 2/3, trust their state legislators more than Congress, and they should. Now, this isn't to say that state legislators are smarter, better people, more honest. This is to say they're closer to you. You can talk to your state legislators. You can keep tabs on them. You can keep them under your thumb, and you can remove them more easily than you can remove Congress. Congress is detached, dishonest, and monetarily interested in what they're doing. So, yeah, I think people should distrust Congress and trust their state legislators more. But I would say, as Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. 71%, so more than 2/3, almost 3/4, believe additional limits are needed on federal power. Convention of States, anyone? That's correct. In other words, they think the federal government is too powerful. This is super interesting, by the way, because the sample oversampled Democrats. So even Democrats believe that we need to limit federal power. 88% support term limits. See this? Term limits for career politicians. This is why you need that shirt. 88%. Think about that. Almost 90% of people say they want term limits for career politicians. Will the politicians ever impose that on themselves? Of course they won't. They never will. So if it's going to happen, got to call a Convention of States and make it happen. And finally, and importantly, and broadly, 68%, so over 2/3, back a meeting of the states to propose amendments for fiscal responsibility and limits on power and term limits. I mean, that's an incredible number. In other words, you have 2/3 of Americans across party lines in the United States of America that say, yes, call a Convention of States. So why hasn't it happened? I don't know. Maybe because we need you to volunteer to save their America. You need to get involved. You need to go to conventionofstates.com, get involved there. You need to get involved in the Save Their America promotion. You can promote that online by putting hashtag Save Their America. You can go there online by going to conventionofstates.com upload, conventionestates.com/upload. And don't forget, while we're talking about term limits, you can get your term limits tee at Article 5. That's Article VOutfitters.com. All right, before we close, we're going to go to some questions real quick. This is Ask Mark Anything. You can ask me by going to conventionofstates.com/ask Mark. David Combs says, can defunding the numerous federal agencies stop the enforcement of the rules, laws, and regulations they have imposed? Or do these laws, rules, and regulations have to be rescinded individually by Congress? David, I think from a practical perspective, if there's nobody there to enforce them, then the regulations don't exist. The laws that enable them, if we remove that authority from Congress by getting rid of the authority to have these agencies, that's the way to do it. That Congress shall have no authority to spend any money on or regulate education. That would get rid of all those rules, laws, and regulations. So they do not have to be rescinded regularly. JB wants to know, how do we convince Democrats to get on board? My answer is this. Look, this is nonpartisan. Now, to be clear and transparent, I'm a right winger. I'm just a right wing guy. That's who I am. I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian. I'm a gun toting, Bible thumping guy. And so they might not like me because of that, right? I'm pro-life. But the reality is, Convention of States is simply about taking power away from the federal government and giving it back to the regular people of the United States of America. So California would get more power. New York would get more power. Texas and Oklahoma would get more power. This goes back to the vision of the founders that we would have all our states essentially be sovereign. There would be basic constitutional stuff that is contained in the Constitution that we all have to abide by, the Bill of Rights and such, and that there would be essentially the enumerated powers, the only thing that the federal government can do. That gives the states more power, and it gives liberal states as much power as conservative states. It just lets us be different. Like, I used to live in California. I didn't like the governance there, so I came to Texas. And if I don't like the governance here, I can move somewhere else. And if it all comes from Washington, D.C., then none of us can get away from it. If you're a Democrat, you're worried about President Trump being reelected, a conservative Congress, a conservative court, you should want a convention of states to take that power away from the federal government, give it back to your state. Be as liberal as you want to be within the bounds of the Constitution. All right. Again, we're going to close by saying, don't forget, get the swag. Go to Article 5outfitters.com. Order your term limits t-shirt today. This is the brand new latest thing. That's why I've got my fancy one. You can see it's all fresh and unwrinkled. I love when I get the new t-shirts, the new gear. So go there, get that. We got some great pocket knives on the site. We got hats. We got all kinds of good stuff. We're designing some fall and winter gear right now that you guys are going to love. Also, don't forget to participate in Save Their Country. And this is super important, right? Save it for them. Don't just save it for yourself. And you can do that by going to Save Their America. Actually, go to conventionstates.com/upload. Hashtag Save Their America. And you can, by the way, follow me if you want. Go to X, formerly Twitter. I just call it X now. Go to X now and follow me at Mark Meckler on X. God bless you guys. I appreciate everything you do. And we will see you next week on the BattleCry.